whole project is really about normalizing migration, recognizing that in a sense, we are all migrants, particularly in the UK, and that this is a part of our history and it is something to be celebrated. And even in areas like Cumbria, where I used to do a lot of work, and half the kids had grandparents who were born in Ireland or Scotland. Most of us in the UK have connections, are migrants ourselves or have a heritage of migration, and that we all know people who have also moved around the world. So the project was really just about trying to challenge the increasingly negative discourses about migration and to start seeing it as something positive that actually we benefit from and we need as a country.
So it was really, really lovely to build a team of adult volunteers. They all built relationships with each other. They supported each other. They kind of asked each other questions. Oh, that's really interesting, but I want to know more about that part of the story that you found. So there was some independent working, there was some working together, but it all started with that kind of exposure to the archives and the raw material.
So one of the things was that we wanted to make sure that everything that was explored was evidenced, but that has some really interesting implications for gender, for example, and class and ethnicity, because who is recorded for what purposes, when and why, often favours men. It favours certain types of migration over others. So we really wanted to make sure that we included women and that we included children. So we know, for example, that one of the stories on the website is about Kramer, the German pork butcher. Well, he's travelling with his family, and we know from a family photograph that he's married, that he has children, but their experience of migration is much harder to capture.
People generally don't respond to facts and figures. It doesn't move them. It doesn't shift their values or attitudes. It was important then to be able to have those stories either written or heard and seen online and readily available. So storytelling, some of us believe, is one of the most powerful ways of changing attitudes.
These volunteers all started with personal interests. They wanted to find out about women in science or the first black footballer. And these are stories which are sometimes already part of the historical record, but a lot of the people on the map are not necessarily people who would have been investigated for any other purpose than that they have been discovered and someone's got curious about them. And telling history through the lives of individuals is such an important way of taking very abstract ideas like the push and pull factors of migration and actually seeing how that plays out in an individual's life.
If we considered Arthur Wharton, at the time England was selling and has the best PR that we are the ruler of the world, the best is in England. So who wouldn't buy into that? So Arthur came here for school, did a good period of a grammar school here. He was from an elite, quote-unquote, family. Therefore, his parents were able to send him to school here. Colonialism has been a pull factor as well as a push factor, especially during the heights of the triangular trade between 1700 to the 1800. Britain had merchants going to West Africa, moving people through force and other means to the Caribbean for sugar plantation. Walton's story began around that time.
The beauty for me of using the lens of migration is that it had the potential to be a doorway into an enormous variety of social issues, historical phenomena, particular places and times. So we looked at the stories of individuals, but through that maybe if we were looking in year 2, when we collected more recent oral histories, I worked with a couple of individuals who grew up under communism in the USSR. And through those people sharing their stories with young pupils in school, in a Liverpool-based school, those young people started to explore the Iron Curtain. Some of them had never heard of the Iron Curtain. What was it? You know, they were able to explore what lack of power or lack of choice meant for those people living in the USSR at that time. That's one example out of what could be many, many, many.
You know, there's been benefits of the project for different, you know, the volunteers, people sharing their stories. I'd like it to be a resource that schools and communities can use in discussions around migration to actually challenge what we're getting from the media.
One of the things that really inspired the project is how ahistorical and inaccurate much of what we are told about migration and the stories that we are told about local identities and bastions of Englishness, for example. And so one of the things that the project was doing was to show how long migration has been part of human history, and to ask people to think a little bit more about the lives behind the stories that we're told, and also to demand rigour in the accuracy of the stories which we're being told, and to become a little bit more alert to the ways in which migration in particular is misrepresented in the media.
So I found a school who was up for being involved. We went through a process with that school of a participatory workshop exploring migration and talking about migration in and out of Liverpool and what they knew already. And then we went into a process of training them to become oral history researchers. We went on to train the young people in the creation of digital stories, which is kind of short form storytelling using audio, kind of narration track and images.
We really wanted to be open to the volunteers exploring what they choose to explore, but we did have certain things we wanted to make sure the project reflected. So one of them was how long migration has been part of human existence. From the beginning of historical records, people have moved. We also wanted to make sure that we told this as a story that wasn't just unidirectional. This is not just about people arriving in our localities, in our towns, in our counties. This is as much about individuals from those places going out into the wider world.
It was really important for us to challenge the idea that most people have, that migration is about immigration to the UK. There's very little perception that actually there's a lot of emigration from the UK, even still now. It's very much about the idea that actually human history is based on migration. It is the history of humans to migrate.